They marched in the name of God, but what they left behind was a trail of blood, fire, and horror the church never preached about. Today, we're diving into the dark side of the Crusades, those holy wars you may have learned were about faith and heroism. But behind the banners of the cross lurked something far more disturbing: massacres of civilians, forced conversions, even cannibalism. These weren't isolated incidents. They were systematic acts committed by armies that believed they were doing God's work. In this video, we uncover the shocking crimes of the Crusader armies, the moments sanitized by legend, but seared into the memories of those who survived. Buckle up, because this is the Crusades like you've never seen them before. The Siege of Jerusalem, 1099, a holy city, drenched in blood. In July 1099, after a grueling journey across hostile terrain, a battered and malnourished Crusader army arrived at the gates of Jerusalem. The city, then under the control of the Fatimid Caliphate, represented both a spiritual endpoint and a promised prize for the soldiers who had marched for years under the sign of the cross. But the moment of victory did not bring peace or reverence. Instead, it culminated in one of the most brutal massacres of the First Crusade. The siege itself lasted less than 15 days. On July 15th, the Crusaders breached the city's defenses. According to chronicler Raymond of Aguilares, cries of Deus vult, God wills it, echoed through the streets as knights stormed the city. But what followed was not an orderly conquest. It was a slaughter. Civilians and defenders alike fled to sacred sites such as the Al-Aqsa Mosque, hoping for refuge. But the violence did not stop at sanctuary doors. Raymond painted a horrifying picture stating, "In the Temple of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins." Maarat al-Nuan, 1098. Cannibalism in a city of the dead. Several months before the fall of Jerusalem, another Syrian city bore witness to a horror scarcely imaginable. During the winter of 1098, the Crusaders laid siege to Maarat al-Nuan, already weakened by months of hunger, illness, and hardship. After weeks of resistance, the city's defenses crumbled. What happened next not only defied military convention, it shocked even the Crusaders themselves. The city was brutally sacked. According to sources from both sides of the conflict, the Crusaders killed a large number of inhabitants, both combatants and civilians. Yet it was the aftermath that cast the darkest shadow. With supplies exhausted and desperation mounting, some Crusaders reportedly resorted to cannibalism. Radulf of Caen, a Norman priest and chronicler, grimly recorded, "Our men cooked the bodies of the Saracens and devoured them." Muslim historian Ibn al-Athir added an equally chilling note, claiming that the Crusaders boiled adults in cooking pots and impaled children on spits. These accounts, while varying in tone and detail, agree on the fact that acts of cannibalism occurred. Modern historians believe such incidents were likely isolated and not widespread. Yet even isolated instances signal a catastrophic breakdown of moral and religious restraint. Hunger had erased the line between humanity and horror. The Crusaders, who claimed to be holy warriors, now fed on the very people they had just massacred, turning divine mission into a grotesque parody of faith. Faith at sword point, forced conversions, and religious coercion. The Crusades were often portrayed by their leaders as wars of liberation, a means of reclaiming the Holy Land from infidels. But liberation was seldom synonymous with tolerance. In many captured cities, non-Christian populations, particularly Muslims and Jews, were forced into conversions under the threat of death. This was not merely a spiritual mission. It was an ideological conquest. After the fall of Jerusalem, some inhabitants were reportedly spared if they agreed to baptism. In other cities, communities were told to convert or face slaughter. One of the earliest and most infamous episodes of this kind occurred during the Rhineland massacres of 1096, when mobs of Crusaders attacked Jewish communities on their way to the east. Chronicler Solomon Bar Simpson wrote that entire Jewish populations were given a dire ultimatum: convert to Christianity or be executed. While some submitted, many chose martyrdom, refusing to betray their covenant. Not all Crusader leaders supported forced conversion. Raymond IV of Toulouse and a few others voiced objections, arguing that faith coerced at the point of a sword was no true faith. The Church, too, had long debated the theological legitimacy of forced baptisms. In theory, it condemned them. In practice, it often turned a blind eye. The trauma of these conversions left deep scars in the communities affected. For many, the Crusades were not holy wars, but acts of cultural and spiritual annihilation, where the sword didn't just take lives, but identities. The sack of Constantinople, 1204 Christians betrayed Christendom. Perhaps the most damning episode in crusading history came not at the hands of Muslims or Jews, but in a betrayal by Christians against Christians. During the Fourth Crusade, the Crusader army, originally tasked with recapturing Jerusalem, ended up attacking the heart of Eastern Christianity, Constantinople. Perhaps the most damning episode in crusading history came not at the hands of Muslims or Jews, but in a betrayal by Christians against Christians. During the Fourth Crusade, the Crusader army, originally tasked with recapturing Jerusalem, ended up attacking the heart of Eastern Christianity, Constantinople. This redirection of the campaign was influenced by a series of political entanglements and economic pressures, especially debts owed to Venice. After installing a pro-Crusader emperor who was quickly deposed, the Crusaders, furious and unpaid, decided to take what they were owed by force. On April 12, 1204, they breached the city's mighty walls and launched into a frenzy of plunder. What followed was 3 days of unchecked looting and desecration. Churches were stripped of relics. The Hagia Sophia, one of Christendom's most sacred cathedrals, was defiled. The historian Nikitas Choniates described Crusaders breaking into tombs, looting relics, and even setting sacred buildings ablaze. The violence was not only material, it was symbolic. This was not merely a military conquest, it was the evisceration of centuries of Eastern Christian tradition by fellow believers. Siege of Antioch, 1097 to 1098. A city of suffering and starvation. Before Jerusalem, before Constantinople, there was Antioch, an ancient city with deep Christian roots and formidable defenses. The siege of Antioch lasted nearly 8 months and tested the Crusaders to their breaking point. Surrounded by the forces of the Seljuk Turks, the Crusaders suffered from hunger, disease, and dwindling morale. The situation became so dire that horses were eaten, leather was boiled for food, and grass was scavenged for nourishment. Chronicler Fulcher of Chartres described the agony in stark terms. The famine was so great that many boiled grass, leaves, and animal skins to sustain themselves. Disease and exhaustion claimed countless lives, and morale teetered on the edge of collapse. When the city finally fell in June 1098, thanks in part to betrayal from within, the Crusaders unleashed a torrent of violence. Civilians and defenders alike were slaughtered, and any pretense of chivalric restraint vanished in the chaos. Blood flowed through the streets as holy purpose gave way to savage reprisal. Antioch was more than a strategic victory. It was a crucible of suffering. There, the Crusaders learned that desperation could override even the most fervent ideals. Conclusion: faith and force, glory and grief. The Crusades were not just battles for land or theology, they were complex, brutal episodes in human history where faith collided with politics. And sacred ideals were too often corrupted by earthly ambitions. Cities were razed, cultures disrupted, and countless innocents perished beneath the pretext of holy purpose. Their legacy remains contentious. For some, they symbolize religious devotion and courage. For others, they are reminders of hypocrisy, savagery, and fanaticism, cloaked in divine justification. As the Byzantine historian Niketas Choniates once wrote with bitter clarity, even the Saracens are merciful compared with these men who bear the cross of Christ. So we ask, can sacred purpose ever truly excuse worldly destruction? Or are the Crusades a cautionary tale of what happens when the divine is used to justify the inhuman? The Crusades weren't just battles for Holy Land, they were battlegrounds for the human soul, where faith clashed with fanaticism and mercy was often drowned in blood. From Jerusalem to Constantinople, the horrors committed in the name of salvation have left scars that still shape religious and political tensions today. So we ask you, can any sacred mission truly justify such destruction? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unfiltered history. And remember, sometimes the past is darker than we dare to believe.